We've defined economics as the study of rational choice in situations of scarcity. In this lecture, we're going to take a closer look at the concept of scarcity and how economists describe scarcity. Scarcity means that you have a limited quantity of resources with which to satisfy potentially unlimited wants. But let's be more careful about that. What are those resources, and what can we do with them? How do we use our resources to create the goods and services that satisfy our desires? In order to represent the possibilities of an economy, we're going to introduce a tool, and that tool is the production possibilities curve. Now, we're going to be working towards that, but first, I want to introduce a concept that will be very important in this lecture and really throughout the course, and that's the concept of efficiency. Efficiency refers to doing the best you can with what you have, or making the largest quantity of output possible with your given quantity of inputs. Efficiency refers to getting the most you can out of what you have. So for instance, if we have a cook who is talented with lots of good recipes, and he has a lot of food in the kitchen to work with, and a good set of knives and other tools and a stove, efficient behavior would be using his talent and those resources to produce the most meals that he's capable of producing, getting the largest quantity of output from a given quantity of input. If he wastes some of the food, if he uses his time wastefully so that the quantity of output that goes out the door of his kitchen is less than is possible, then we say that his behavior is inefficient. Suppose we have an economy that produces two goods, and for the sake of our example, we'll make these an agricultural example. Our two goods are wheat and rice. So let's suppose we have an economy that produces these two products. Efficient behavior would be for the economy to produce the most wheat that it can possibly produce for a given quantity of rice. That is, using all of the resources that are left over that aren't producing rice and making the largest quantity of wheat possible. That's what we mean when we refer to efficiency, getting the most you can out of your limited quantity of resources. Now, I want to describe the production possibilities of a particular economy. This hypothetical economy produces only two goods, wheat and rice. Before I describe the production possibilities, you might want a little additional information. The first thing you're going to want to know is, well, what resources are available in this economy with which to produce these two grains? How much arable land is in this economy? Is the land wet or is it dry? What kind of labor is there in this economy? What kind of tools? Are there tractors and combines, or are there merely shovels and hoes? The first thing you need to know when you want to describe the production possibilities of an economy is, what is the resource endowment of that economy? How much land, labor, and capital does that economy have to work with? The second thing that you're going to want to know is, what are the capabilities of this economy given these resources? That is, what are the strategies this economy has for combining inputs to produce output? And we call that the economy's technology. When an economist refers to technology, the economist means a complete catalog of all the things this economy knows how to do, all the ways in which this economy can combine inputs to produce output. There are techniques that involve using shovels and hoes and low-skilled labor on particular kinds of land to produce rice or wheat. There are techniques that involve using tractors and combines and a different kind of land to produce rice and wheat. A technique is a particular combination of inputs, but a technology refers to all the possible combinations of resources that the economy can use to produce output. So when an economist refers to technology, the economist is referring to a catalog, a complete list of all the things the economy knows how to do. When your technology improves, it usually means that you're able to produce more output with less input because you're using that input in a smarter way. Now, given our knowledge of the economy's resources and what we know about the economy's technology, we're able to describe the production possibilities of the economy. And I'm going to do that first in this table. This table represents the production possibilities of our hypothetical economy. And every combination of numbers in this chart represents an efficient combination. That is, we're saying that if our economy uses its resources, all of them in the production of wheat, it can produce 80 bushels of wheat a year. Well, since all the resources are devoted to wheat production, there isn't going to be any rice production in this case. If the economy moves some of its resources into the production of rice, and let's suppose that it moves those resources that are best suited for rice production, the wet land, the workers who know more about rice production, tools that are well suited for the production of rice, the economy can produce 20 bushels of rice and still produce 78 bushels of wheat. Notice that the wheat production is decreasing as resources are moved into the production of rice. But since we're moving first those resources that are well suited for the production of rice, we can get a large increase in rice production for a small decrease in wheat production. Next, we can get an additional 20 bushels of rice per year if we reduce wheat production by 8 more bushels of wheat a year. The combination 70 and 40 is another efficient combination. That is, the maximum amount of wheat that we can get out of our economy when we're producing 40 bushels of rice is 70 bushels of wheat, if we're using all of the resources in the best uses possible and everyone is working as productively as they can. If we increase rice production to 60 bushels a year, wheat production falls to 55 bushels. And if we increase rice production to 80 bushels a year, then wheat production falls to 38. Finally, if we put all of the resources in our economy into the production of rice, we get 100 bushels of rice per year. And of course, no wheat, because all of the resources are devoted to rice production. So the production possibilities table represents those efficient combinations of rice and wheat production that are possible given the economy's technology and given its resource endowment. That is, for each number in the right-hand column, for each quantity of rice produced a year, the number in the left-hand column tells us the maximum quantity of wheat that this economy can produce, using its resources with efficiency. Now, I've got a production possibilities table here. I've got the combinations of wheat and rice that are possible to be produced in this economy. I'm going to now represent this information graphically. I'm going to put the production possibilities information into a diagram, and we're going to call this diagram the production possibilities curve, or the production possibilities frontier. First thing I need to do when I draw a diagram is make sure that I've carefully labeled the axes. So the first thing we'll do is we'll put wheat production on the vertical axis. That is, the number on the vertical axis refers to the quantity of wheat in bushels that's produced in this economy in a year. The next thing will be to label the horizontal axis, and we'll put rice production here. The number on the horizontal axis tells us the quantity of rice that's produced in this economy in a year. Now, next thing I want to do, since I'm going to be using real numbers, and I want to be careful about plotting this curve accurately, I want to calibrate the axes. I'll want to put some numbers in that tell me how things are measured on each axis. Let's use, since I'm going up to 80 bushels of wheat, let's make each hash mark on this axis equal to 20. So here's 20 bushels of wheat. Here's 40. Here's 60. And here's 80. And I can keep on going, but I'm calibrating the axis here with each hash mark representing 20 additional bushels of wheat. Same thing with rice here. I'll make this be 20, and this 40, and this 60, and here's 80, and finally 1. And of course, it keeps going. Now I've got my axes calibrated and labeled carefully, so I'm ready to draw my graph. And let's now take the numbers, which are now over on the board, and put them as points on a curve in this diagram. So the first combination of wheat and rice that's possible is all the resources devoted to wheat production. We produce 80 bushels of wheat and 0 rice. That gives us a point that's right here on the vertical axis. The next combination is 20 bushels of rice and 78 bushels of wheat. So we go over here to 20 bushels of rice and up to 78 bushels of wheat, and I put another point on the curve. If we produce 40 bushels of rice, then the maximum wheat production I can get out of my economy is 70. So there's another point on the curve. With 60 bushels of rice, I get 55 bushels of wheat. With 80 bushels of rice, I get 38 bushels of wheat. And finally, with 100 bushels of rice, my wheat production has been pushed down to 0 because all of the resources are devoted to the production of rice. So what I did was take the numbers from the production possibility schedule and put them in a diagram with wheat on the vertical axis and rice on the horizontal axis. Now, these are not the only combinations of wheat and rice that we can imagine. In fact, you can imagine our economy moving resources continually or continuously out of the production of wheat into the production of rice, so that the quantity of rice produced increases gradually as the quantity of wheat produced falls gradually. If we plotted all the possible points, they would lie between these blue points, and if I connected the dots, I would get a nice, smooth, continuous curve, and this curve is called the production possibilities curve, or the production possibilities frontier. The production possibilities frontier is defined thusly. The production possibilities frontier is a collection of points representing the maximum amount of wheat that can be produced for a given quantity of rice production. These points are all of the efficient combinations of wheat and rice that can be produced in the economy. For any point on this horizontal axis, you can go up to the blue curve and find the maximum amount of wheat that can be produced when the economy is producing this quantity of rice. That's the production possibilities curve. As we look at the production possibilities curve, we can see that there are many things represented in this picture that are very basic concepts in economics. The first thing that we notice whenever we look at this picture is that there are points that are outside the production possibilities frontier. There are points such as this one, where we have 80 bushels of wheat and 80 bushels of rice produced in a given year. This point would be a great point because it involves a lot of everything. However, this point is not attainable. This point reminds us that scarcity is a reality in this economy. Given the quantity of land, labor, and capital, given our resource endowment, and given the technology that's available to us in this economy, this point out here, we'll call this point S, because it represents scarcity. This point is unattainable. We simply can't get to it. There's no way to make this much wheat whenever we're making this much rice. So points that lie outside the production possibilities frontier represent a larger quantity of goods than this economy can possibly produce. They remind us of the reality of scarcity. Likewise, points that lie within the production possibilities frontier remind us of inefficiency. I'll call this point down here point U. Point U is certainly possible. It's always possible for us to produce points that are within the production possibilities frontier. But why would we want to? We would prefer to be up on the production possibilities frontier with more of everything. If more is better, we would always prefer a point on the blue curve to a point inside it. But these are the points that we wind up with when the economy uses its resources inefficiently. If the economy is not getting the maximum possible productive output from its resources, we're going to be inside this curve. That happens when some resources are unemployed, that is, if some of the land or labor is not used. It also happens if some of the resources are underemployed, that is, if resources are used in a way that is not maximizing their output. For instance, if we take wet land and use it to cultivate wheat, and dry land and use it to cultivate rice, we're going to wind up with less grain than we could produce. Because wet land is better for rice and dry land is better for wheat, we're going to wind up inside the production possibility frontier at a point of inefficiency, unemployment or underemployment of resources. Here's another thing to notice. The production possibilities curve is downward sloping. That means that as we increase production of rice, we are necessarily reducing the production of wheat. In order to produce additional bushels of rice, you have to give up wheat that you might otherwise have produced. That is, wheat is the opportunity cost of rice. Anytime you want to increase rice production, you're going to have to move resources out of the production of wheat. Land, labor, and capital that's used to produce wheat is transferred into the production of rice in order to increase rice production, and that means that wheat production will be decreasing. Wheat is the opportunity cost of rice. We can actually calculate this opportunity cost. Look, whenever we increase rice production from 0 to 20 bushels a year, wheat production is falling from 80 bushels to 78 bushels. The opportunity cost of the first 20 bushels of rice is 2 bushels of wheat. We can even calculate the opportunity cost per bushel of rice by doing a little calculation. First, let's calculate the change in wheat production. The change in wheat production is the new quantity of 78 minus the old quantity of 80 for a change in wheat production of -2, a loss of 2 bushels. The rice production is 20 minus the old quantity of 0, so the change in rice production is 20 bushels. 20 minus 0 equals 20. Now, divide the change in wheat production by the change in rice production, and you'll get -2 over 20, or -1/10. That is, for each additional bushel of rice that we are producing between 0 and 20, on average, we're giving up 1/10 of a bushel of wheat. 1/10 a bushel of wheat is the opportunity cost of each bushel of rice, on average, between 0 and 20. Notice something else, that if we draw a line connecting these 2 points, the original point of 80 and 0, and the new point of 78 bushels of wheat and 20 bushels of rice. If we draw a line connecting those 2 points, the slope of that line is going to be the change in wheat production divided by the change in rice production. Now remember, what's the formula for the slope of a line? The rise over the run. As we move between these 2 points, the rise is the change in wheat production. The rise is the change in the vertical coordinate. That is, we go from 80 to 78, -2. That's the rise. The run is the change in the horizontal coordinate. We go from 0 to 20. So that change of 20 is the run. -2 divided by 20 is the rise over the run. The change in wheat production divided by the change of rice production. And in this case, that number is -1/10. So I'll go ahead and put a little mark here indicating that I'm calculating the slope between those 2 points, and I'll make a note that it's -1/10. The slope of the production possibility frontier represents the opportunity cost of rice production, measured in terms of the wheat that we're giving up. As we move between these 2 points, each additional bushel of rice that we produce is costing us 1/10 of a bushel of wheat, on average. The slope of the production possibility frontier is the opportunity cost of rice production, measured in terms of wheat given up. We can calculate the slope down here as we move from 80 to 100 bushels of rice, and we'll find we get a different number. The change in wheat production is the movement from 38 bushels of wheat to 0 bushels of wheat. Take the new quantity of wheat, which is 0, subtract the old quantity, which is 38, and you get -38, a loss of 38 bushels of wheat. The change in rice production is 100, the new quantity, minus 80, the old quantity. That gives us 20 bushels of rice added. -38 divided by 20 reduces to -19 over 10, or -1.9. If I connect these 2 dots, the slope of this dotted black line is the rise over the run, the change in wheat production divided by the change in rice production. And this slope in this case is -19 over 10, or -1.9. That is, for each additional bushel of rice that we're adding between 8 and 100, on average, we're giving up almost 2 bushels of wheat for each additional bushel of rice. The opportunity cost is 1.9 bushels of wheat lost for every bushel of rice added. Notice the opportunity cost down here is much larger. Each additional bushel of rice costs almost 2 bushels of wheat. Up here, each additional bushel of rice costs only 1/10 of a bushel of wheat. The opportunity cost is changing as we move along the production possibility frontier. And you can tell by looking at it. The slope of the curve is pretty flat up here near the vertical axis. As we move down the curve, the slope gets steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper as we approach the horizontal axis. Remember, the slope of the production possibility frontier is the opportunity cost of producing rice measured in terms of wheat that you give up. So down here, the opportunity cost is very high, whereas up here, the opportunity cost is relatively low. What does that tell us? Well, this is the final thing to notice about the production possibility frontier, is that the production possibility frontier is concave. That is, it bows outwards. The slope of the production possibility frontier is pretty flat near the top and pretty steep near the bottom. And the slope is decreasing. That is, the slope is becoming a larger and larger negative number. The curve is getting steeper as we move down it. What does that tell us? It tells us that the opportunity cost of producing rice is increasing. The more rice we produce, the more expensive it gets to make another bushel. Why? That's because not all resources are equally well suited for the production of wheat and rice. Some resources are very well suited to the production of rice. These resources include wet land, workers who know a lot about rice cultivation, particular types of tools that are well suited for tending rice. Some resources are better suited to the production of wheat. Those include dry land. They also include workers who know a lot about wheat production, fertilizers that are good for wheat, and so forth. When an economy has a scarce, strictly limited quantity of resources, some of them will be very well suited to the production of one good, others will be better suited to the production of the other good. In this case, when we first begin to produce rice, we're going to be using the wettest land and the workers that know the most about rice production. That wet land probably wasn't growing a lot of wheat. Therefore, when we first start to produce rice, we can do so with a small opportunity cost. Very little wheat is given up because that land wasn't very productive anyway for wheat. It was better suited for rice. But as we make more and more and more rice, we're using up all the land that's well suited for rice, and then eventually we have to draw on the land that's better suited for wheat, dry land, and workers who know more about wheat cultivation than they know about rice. That's when the opportunity cost starts to get very, very large. Down here, we have to move a lot of dry land out of the production of wheat just to get an additional 20 bushels of rice. And that's very costly in terms of the wheat that we lose. That's why the opportunity cost of rice production increases the more rice the economy chooses to produce. So, there you have it. 4 things about economics that you can tell by looking at a production possibilities frontier. First of all, you see that scarcity is a reality. Some combinations of wheat and rice are simply unattainable, given our technology and our resources. Next, notice that there are a lot of inefficient points. There are a lot of combinations of wheat and rice that aren't taking full advantage of the resources and technology that we have. Third, notice that the curve is downward sloping. That is, there's an opportunity cost. If you want to produce more rice, you have to give up wheat production. Once again, that's because of scarcity. And finally, the curve is concave. That is, the slope is getting steeper as we move down it. The curve gets steeper because the opportunity cost of rice production increases the more rice we make. This increasing opportunity cost is due to the fact that some resources are well suited to rice production and other resources are not. So this simple tool captures in it most of the basic ideas of economics: scarcity, efficiency, opportunity cost, the suitability of resources. In the next lesson, we'll look at how changes in resources and changes in technology affect the way this picture looks.